Kia ora team, Noah Willoff here, host of the Beyond the Surface podcast. Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. Before you get into this juicy conversation, please make sure you go check out our official sponsor of the podcast, Moana Road. They really have something for everyone. They've got sunglasses, a whole range of awesome products. So check out their website and the link in the description below and support Moana Road because it also supports the podcast and helps us get more of the guests on that you love. Hope you enjoy this episode. Cheers. Amber, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Noah. Great to be here.
People listening wouldn't know, but we've just spent probably the last 45 minutes trying to sort out some tech difficulties. So thanks so much for your patience. We basically recorded an entire episode almost without the cameras running or anything, just through chatting while we're trying to sort out all of the tech issues. So yeah, thanks for your patience bearing with us.
No problem. Yeah, no, I'm excited. I think we're going to have a great chat.
It'll be good. Yeah, well, first off, thanks so much for jumping on the podcast. Awesome to get the connection in through Mahesh. Yeah. Shout out to Mahesh. When I was doing some research on you and your story, Amber, some sort of keywords sort of popped up. Painter, artist, creative, software engineer, CEO, entrepreneur, founder. And I was really keen to sort of dive back to the early days of you in high school. Obviously, you were born in the UK, grew up in Palmy, but I think your life direction has very changed quite a lot from your early days at high school, from wanting to be a painter. So take us back to, Amber in high school and what led to the change of taking the route of business.
Yeah, great question. In high school in Palmerston North, I really enjoyed painting. I think it was definitely my favorite topic. But I was into the social studies and the English and maths and computer science and science in general was not very front of mind for me. But painting was. I loved it. And what kind of changed my mind, I guess, on that was really a discussion with my younger brother. I have two younger brothers. One of them's 2 years younger than me. And he was always the opposite to me. The maths guy, the gamer, really into programming. And I came home one day after school and he's sitting in the lounge with his laptop open doing a computer science assignment for school. And I remember it was like a terminal screen. But at the time, all I saw was a black screen, green text, like him hacking away. I was like, whoa, what are you doing?
He's in the Matrix.
He's in the Matrix. I know. And I said, hey, are you a hacker? Is this legal? And he's like, yeah, it's just an assignment. It's no problem at all. And I was like, well, can you teach me it? That looks really interesting. And he goes, Amber, it's really not your thing. You're really not going to like it. And I was like, no, I'm really interested and I really want to learn. He's like, no, it's just don't even bother. You're not going to like it. It's not your thing. Just leave it alone. And I kind of took real personal offense to that. And I was like, no, this is something I'm really interested in. So I went to school the next day and found at my school there was they called it digital technologies, a digital technologies teacher. And I said, hey, I'm really interested in learning to code. Can I join the class? And it was my final year of high school. And she said, well, have you done the past 4 years? And I said, no. And she said, well, you can't join. And I said, how many people are in the class in last year? She said 6. And I said, and you're really going to turn me down? She said, yeah, you're right. Okay, you can join. And so, I joined in my last year. I wasn't particularly good at it. But what I found was that I could actually create things with code the same way, in the same creative sort of style that I could with paint. But instead of it just hanging on a wall and being, visible to people who are walking past, I could send this code anywhere and it could implement people or affect people from all over the world. And that was so exciting to me. So I just found it as a very creative medium. And that's what got me kind of off art, I guess, so to speak, or changed my mind about what is computer science.
That's incredible. And it's amazing to hear that, your villain arc, your catalyst for change is almost like a petty argument that you had with your brother that has led you and helped influence you to where you are today. That's incredible. Well, going back to, I guess, the blend between being an artist and painting and then coding, what are some of those things that maybe your interest in painting has taught you or provided value to you now as a software engineer?
Yeah, it's a really great point. I think that with art, a lot of it comes from within you. You're not really going out and doing a whole lot of market research, oh, what does the audience want to see? What are they going to resonate most with? a lot of it comes from your own direction and your own judgment on what you think is going to be good or not. And I think that there's an aspect to that to great product design, which at the end of the day, if you're a software engineer, I think it's really rewarding to be working on products and building things that people are going to use. So I think that the tie there with art is that, you know, in art, a lot of it has to come from your own direction. You need to have a very strong judgment about, why am I doing this? What message am I trying to get across? What is the purpose for me creating this piece of work? And in software, you need some of that too. But the balance is that obviously, you know, if you're trying to sell something, just like if you're trying to sell a painting, someone needs to actually like it. You know, you can't just do something that you are going to find really awesome, but someone else might look at that and be like, there's no way I want that in my living room. You know, so knowing your market, I would say, is kind of the balance with actually what is my artistic direction.
I love that. Yeah, there's so many interesting parallels where if you put them side by side, you'd be like, there's nothing in common with being a artist or a painter and, you know, coding, but there's so many similarities which sort of weave into each other. So that sort of conversation with your brother led you to then study computer software engineering.
Yes.
And you graduated with honors, which is epic. Tell us about how that sort of next few years at universities sort of transitioned you to thinking entrepreneurially around a business idea.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there were a few things going on. I think the first thing is inherently when you're studying programming and computer science, you're surrounded by a lot of builders, people who want to create things. And there was a lot of hype and, you know, the kind of icons in software engineering is like a Zuckerberg, like Elon Musk type, who's like a nerdy engineer who goes on to build something great and become like a billionaire. You know, it's like a classic kind of like hero's arc.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that kind of like, wow, if they did it, then we could do it too. We are also engineers. So I think that that's in a way built into just the course and what you talk about and what you know is possible. But I think that for me personally, it really was kind of these different steps of, hey, I can build things that are bigger than just myself. I can do things that are bigger than just myself. And, you know, going on exchange was a big part of that because it really leveled me up in terms of like my work ethic and what I can achieve. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of it was actually the culture of just engineering and how that relates to product and then how that relates to business. Yeah.
And so I can imagine like looking at people like Zuckerberg, who's got like the technical know-how, but also is now, you know, CEO of Meta now. And so he can sort of like operate in both worlds. He's not just like some corporate executive, but he actually understands the technical. So I can imagine that can be quite like appealing for many sort of engineers who are building stuff, right? To walk those both of those worlds. When you studied and you spent some time doing an exchange in Singapore, talk us a bit about, I've heard you on like a different presentation, you were talking about like the crazy work culture and work ethic and drive some of the people had that you were studying with. Can you speak around like, how intense was that? What sort of experience did that provide you as a Kiwi, engaging a different culture and seeing how they treat like study and work?
Yeah, so I think you have to kind of understand what I was expecting when I went to Singapore to really understand this experience. So in my first year, I was applying for a whole bunch of scholarships to try and get me through university. And one of them was the Prime Minister's Scholarship to Asia. And I saw this come up. You could submit any sort of trip that you wanted to do to Asia, and you could win funding for that trip because New Zealand was looking to build relationships with Asia. And so I was kind of looking at what's the max that I could do here. People were saying, oh, you can go for a weekend, you can go for a conference, a seminar. And I found out the max was a year. And so I thought, great, I'll just apply for a whole year in exchange. And I just looked up the countries that we were partnered with. Victoria Uni and Wellington was partnered with in Asia that spoke English, and Singapore was there. So I applied and I got it. And that was all the research that I did really into what Singapore was like. And so when I arrived, my expectation was I was going to be on exchange. I'm going to travel. I'm going to like find all sides of like Asia and Vietnam and Malaysia and Cambodia, and you know, studies are going to take the back seat. But actually at NUS, which is the National University of Singapore, it's the highest ranked university in Asia. And I was studying mathematics and computer science. And so if you imagine the top students in all of Asia who have studied like since they were 3 years old,
Insane.
to get into this university. And then they just let you in as an exchange student, like without doing any sort of tests or any sort of ranking. When I got there, I thought I was a good student in New Zealand, but Singapore was on another level. There was, if you think about the bell curve of grading and how the bottom, percentile will fail and the top percentile will get top marks.
Mm-hmm.
In New Zealand, that might fit between like 40% to 100%,
Mm-hmm.
But in Asia, the entire bell curve sits above 95% in Singapore where I was. So if
Oh
you got
my
95%, you were in the bottom like percentile of the class and you were going to fail just based on being in the bottom. Because I can't fail people on like if you get below a certain score, because then no one would fail because everyone's so good.
Wow. So they're genuinely like moving the goalposts.
Yeah, the goalposts were really high. And just to put this into perspective, there was this one test that I did where it was like in a lab. So you're sitting down at a computer doing this test and it wouldn't submit. I was clicking submit and it was just like a never ending loading screen.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, like 20 minutes after everyone else had left, the tutor comes over. Hey, what's going on? I go, it's not submitting. He's like, okay, we've got two options. Either you can come back and like do this another day, or you can just take the class average. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to come back another day. But I've been studying really hard. I was kind of getting like 85%. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. But like, screw it. I'm just going to take the class average.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, awesome. That's 96%.
What?
I know. I was like, cool, awesome.
Might have found a way to rig university, eh?
Yeah.
If that's how they can pass you.
Yeah. So I think that what I thought was going to be a really chill time in Singapore was actually incredibly intense time. By some miracle, I feel I passed and then came back to my fourth and final year in New Zealand. And after a year of the work ethic in Singapore, coming back here felt so relaxed and so almost like everyone was moving in slow motion,
Right.
So I think that really showed me like, okay, I have a real capacity here to be able to perform at a very high level. And I've seen what it takes. It's kind of like training with the very, very best and then going back like down a few divisions. So yeah, it was a very formative experience.
Well, that's super interesting. Yeah, that just makes us feel like, I don't know, we're operating on like second gear and they're probably on like fourth or fifth. What did that sort of bring you, apart from the perspective that, you could do more, did that provide you with any other particular like traits or drive that you brought into, work or study?
Yeah, for all of Singapore's like fantastic work ethic and drive, there was still a lot of things that were missing from Singapore. Like I was trying to join groups that were looking to start businesses or, interested in meeting really top like entrepreneurs and people in Singapore. But they didn't really have a culture of taking risks, which was really interesting because they had all the work ethic, they had the drive, they had the smarts, but there was almost this like, starting your own business there is like something that I would just add to my resume in order to get the job that I need to get,
right.
which was very different. And so when I came back to New Zealand, I had more of an idea of what business meant to me and what I wanted to do with business. And I kind of learned through that the idea of creating a business just to put it on my resume in order to get a top consulting job or a top whatever job wasn't really that appealing to me. I only wanted to get into business if it was really something that I wanted to do myself. And I think that kind of was, I don't know, fortified, that was built upon by an internship that I did as well, which was really great, but also taught me, actually, I don't think I do want to work for anyone else. I think that I have this drive to see what can I do.
That's super interesting. And it's, move from, I think it's a really sort of like natural transition into the concept of NextWork, your startup and business. From what I can gather, you were working on like a university assignment, and one of your sort of final assignments was to basically it will create like a real life solution to a real life company. And that company that you're providing that solution to were using Salesforce. Can you just speak people through, firstly, what was the first initial concept that started NextWork? And then maybe as well for people listening who actually aren't familiar with Salesforce at all, explain what is Salesforce and what does it do?
Yeah, great question. I had that same question when I started. So yeah, I come back from exchange and I was part of this group project. And the group was to create an application for a real world client by the end of the year. And the real world client said, hey, we love what you're doing, but can you build the whole thing in Salesforce? And we were like, absolutely, we can build it in Salesforce. And then
What's
quickly
Salesforce?
went away. Yeah, what is Salesforce? Turns out Salesforce is a really large company and platform. It's something called a CRM, which stands for Customer Relationship Management. And it's basically like if you imagine a company has hundreds or thousands of customers that they need to keep track of. Who are these customers? Where are they in the world? What are their preferences for product? Or, how do they like to receive communications? All of these things are very difficult to manage. And at some point, an Excel spreadsheet doesn't really cut it. And so Salesforce exists as a kind of platform that you can access just like a Google Doc or like a Google Drive. Anyone can access on the internet. And they can all access this data and, have a more synchronized view of the customer. And so I was like, how the hell are we going to build a product for this? This seems like really difficult. And so the lecturers knew nothing about it. I started going to these meetups in town thinking, oh, maybe there'll be like 3 or 4 people there. But actually, I think the first one I went to, there was 60 or 70 people there.
Wow.
And it really hit me like, wow, this is a really big industry. And I was asking questions. And at that meetup, people started coming up to me. Hey, do you want a job? Like, we like that you're here. You're studying software engineering. We're looking to hire grads. And I was like, holy shit, I think this is going to be like really big. I think there's a big opportunity here that we're not really talking about in my classes. So that project, kind of by pure coincidence, really opened me to this whole world of Salesforce and cloud computing, which I wasn't really exposed to in university. And from people's reactions to that, I kind of took that as, I think that I can do something here that's going to make a bit of a splash.
Interesting. And so those meetups were particularly around like Salesforce catch-ups. How does that even work?
Yeah, the Salesforce ecosystem is very like cult-like. So Salesforce has a bunch of these community groups all around the world. There's hundreds and hundreds of them, and each community group is run by a community leader. And to be a community leader, you have to put on like one event a month, I feel, maybe one event a quarter. And the Wellington one is actually very, very strong. They have a very, very good group leader who's very organized, and the events are really well run and very regular. So I kind of came into this really bustling, hyped community, which, not just the community group, but the whole Salesforce community is very cult-like. They've got ranks and badges, and, if you're really, really a standout member, you can get the golden hoodie.
No
which
way.
Is like, I know.
Is the event organizer wearing it? Like, I am the man.
basically, people will put it on their LinkedIn. It's
True.
Mark Benioff, who's the CEO of Salesforce, will like shake your hand at Dreamforce, which is this huge conference they do. It's actually one of the world's largest software conferences. They've had Michelle Obama speak, they've had Barack Obama speak, they've had Pink, I think, performed at the most recent one. Like, it's a full shutdown of San Francisco, and they run this big conference.
Crazy.
So,
never knew so much to Salesforce
I
through a
know.
CRM. I'm more of a HubSpot kind of guy myself, but yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So I guess engaging at these different meetups, meeting people in this sort of software ecosystem, you thought that there was like a bit of an opportunity here. When did you decide that probably sort of like training people how to use Salesforce and get certification was the right idea to explore?
Great question. I think it wasn't until probably a year after that first assignment that I did where I was first introduced to Salesforce. So after that, I came back for my final year of university to do a honors project, which is a full year long project. And that was when I decided I don't really want to follow some PhD students' work. I'd rather just use this as a year to do my own thing. So a little known fact, you can actually submit your own thesis proposal. And as long as you get a lecturer to back you, you can do whatever you want as a project for the whole year. I think I was the only person in my year group to actually submit my own thesis. But I wanted to build an app around Salesforce and then try and, sell it and retire by the time I left uni. So I managed to convince a lecturer to do this with me. And by the end of the year, I built the app, and my lecturers were all very confused about this isn't what we usually see. But the website that I had going for this, which was salesforcetraining.co.nz,
nice.
$20 domain, so good.
How good?
It started getting like quite a lot of traction. And so at the end of the year, I actually ended up accepting a job at Salesforce. I moved up to Auckland for the role.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to say like a month or two before I was about to start, I got a message through this website, which said, hey, we love what you're doing. We need someone really desperately to train our staff in Salesforce. Can you let us know your rate?
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, I can.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of when I started to think, okay, there's something here. I don't, I can take this jump.
Mm. That's amazing. And do you remember like the organization? Were they just like some massive big company just had that on their budget line? We need to train 300 people. Who can we approach?
Yeah, it was MediaWorks.
Right.
Yeah, who did like all of the radio and things like that. Epic company. So yeah, really shout out to them for giving me a shot in those early days. I learned a lot there, and the team that was putting that together was really, really great. So they really inspired me to start and to go forwards and do something really cool. So that, one contract led to a second contract and led to a third contract. And by the end of the year, I was doing really well with B2B training, going into companies and running it. And that kind of led to people saying, hey, Amber, like, we love your training. We're in it. Can you help us personally one-on-one? We want to make a change ourselves in our own lives, or for a promotion, or for a pay rise, or just because I'm interested in this topic. Can you help me in that? And that was like very interesting to me as well, because these were people who weren't coming to me because their manager had told them. They were coming to me because they wanted to be there.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And like when you were developing these courses at that time, did you you must have had to spend so much time on the platform and actually developing a sort of critical path around like how you actually deliver this content so it has value. So like, do you receive any like guidance or mentorship? Because if someone came to me and they're like, hey mate, can you please make a course about podcasting or something, I'll be like, man, I don't even know where to start or how to make sure that content you're delivering to them is valuable. So yeah, how did you sort of develop up what you were going to deliver to them, if that makes sense?
Yeah. A lot of it was really through trying to learn it myself. So someone would come to me and say, hey, can you teach this particular product? And I'd always say, absolutely, I can teach this. No problem. And then I would go and try and learn it. And to start with, the things I was teaching were pretty basic, so I could access them all for free. And I would get the sense of, wow, this is really hard to learn, or like that part was easy, that part was confusing. So I was largely, making the course material around my own experience, trying to learn this platform like 3 weeks before I taught it. So it was all very fresh, which actually was a real great advantage, because sometimes you can have someone who's been in the field for a long time.
True.
They forget what it's like to be a beginner.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I never forgot that, because I was always only a few steps ahead of my students.
True.
But then, as I got better and I started getting more advanced requests of what to teach, they weren't always available for free. So I remember I had some real interesting conversations with Salesforce, where I was trying to convince them to give me access to some of their products for free. And they were saying, we can't do that. And eventually I just said, fine, I'll just buy it. And they said, are you sure? These are like thousands of dollars a month type of subscription products. They're usually for companies that are like hundreds of people and making like millions and millions of dollars a year. We can see that it's just you, and you don't have this. Are you sure you want to buy this? I was like, yep. Like, sign me up. 12-month subscription. Like, here we go. Whew. So there was a lot of things that I did that, might have seemed a bit crazy for like a few months of a contract, but if you really want to do the job right, like, you've got to learn it. And I just took it as part of the job that I was going to obviously buy the product and learn what I was teaching, of course. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a big risk, having to make all those big subscriptions, especially under a one-man sort of sorry, this got out. Under like just operating the business with just one person. When it comes to then, I guess, the pivot to more like B2C inquiries, was that the sort of starting point around sort of scaling up NextWork, or where did that fit in?
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely a turning point. So, people were starting to come to me and ask me for these more like custom-made, personalized paths for what they wanted to achieve in their lives. And I kind of had probably 5 to 10 people asking me for this. So that was when I put a call on LinkedIn. I just put out a post, hey, I'm going to do this course, Salesforce for Newbies. wasn't even a course. It was just a call in the evening, like 1 hour.
Right.
Come in and learn. And I've got maybe 10 people coming, just comment below and I'll add you to the call. And that post went like semi-viral. I think there were 800 comments. There were 500 people who turned up on this call. And I was so excited by this that on the call, I said, by the way, I'm launching a paid course at, 2 weeks from now on this exact topic. I had no payment page. There was nothing set up. So I just said, here's my bank account number. And I just, don't do this, by the way. I just copied and pasted my bank account number into the chat. And I was like, if you transfer me the money for this course, like, you're enrolled. And one shout out to this one guy on the course who was like, 100% I'm in, let's go. And transferred it straight away. And that kind of gave me the like boost that I needed to say, wow, this is going to be huge. This is going to be great. And I spent the next 2 weeks finding 16 more students who were all going to start this course together. And that was kind of how I launched my first B2C course, so to speak. Each of them were paying individually out of pocket. It wasn't a company. And they were all there for their own personal reasons.
Yeah, that's amazing. And shout out to that first guy. I'm also glad your bank account didn't get hacked or anything, just like throwing around
so
like that.
Yeah, it was not my wisest move, but yeah, it got the fire started.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, so when all this is happening, are you sort of trading as NextWork, your company?
No, there was kind of a middle ground of like confusion, I guess, where I was Salesforce training, and then I started training people like B2C in Salesforce, and then people started saying, "Hey, like, we need work. Can you expand to other things like AWS or Azure or like other cloud computing services and platforms?"
Yep.
And I realized that the Salesforce training brand just wasn't going to cut it. Also, Salesforce lawyers had sent me an email and said, you know how you're called Salesforce training?
Oh, true.
Like,
that makes sense.
Yeah, you can't call yourself that. There's a copyright infringement. So there's a lot of different reasons for me to change the name. I had a sister company as well at the time called Cloud Station, which I was actually taking some of my top students that I was training and then hiring them myself and finding them work on a contracting basis. So I kind of had this like little consultancy that was starting to really grow on the side as well, fed directly by the training business.
Nice.
But at the time when I was thinking about the naming and how this was all growing, I was also thinking about where do I want this to go, and NextWork kind of came out of that whole mishmash at the time.
And for people listening that haven't heard of NextWork or understand the problem it's trying to solve, can you articulate what is NextWork and what is that sort of gap in the market that you guys are really sort of pushing home?
Yeah, for sure. So NextWork is all about trying to build the world's greatest online learning platform. We're focused really specifically on people learning vocational skills, so skills that are going to get them into jobs or vocations. We're starting really specifically with cloud computing and AWS. And this is a big problem because learning online really sucks. If anyone has ever experienced learning online, it's very dry, very boring, very disengaging. And yet there's more people learning online every year. And no one's really thought to really push for how can this be a better experience, a better learning online experience. And the second big problem that it solves is that learning online isn't really trusted by industry very well. So, if you do an online course, there's not always a guarantee that it's actually going to get you into a job. And that's a real problem because you put a lot of effort into learning in this very hard, really disengaging, lonely way. And then at the end of it, what you have often isn't even respected in a job interview. So this is what I was seeing from doing all that B2C coursework that started with Salesforce and then gradually expanded over the next year and a half of doing that. I started to realize that these problems really existed, but I also learned how I could solve them. And that's what led to NextWork being born.
Well, yeah, I'm just frantically nodding my head as you're talking because I'm doing a bit of sort of study on the side just through Massey, and it's so clunky. And apparently, don't want to get sued or anything from Massey, but apparently they've got the best sort of platform for digital distance students. And it's to think this is some multi-million-dollar tertiary provider. It's not that cutting edge or as good as I thought it would be heading into it. That's super, super interesting. What's your, I guess a lot of people see a lot of entrepreneurs and founders and see the sort of success that they've had. And I'm keen to go into shortly as well, the process of raising $2.3 million, which is incredible, by the way. But I really wanted to just hear from you, how tough was that sort of first year of starting NextWork, both from perhaps like a mental health perspective, from a work demand perspective, and then just, having to put potential people's salaries and responsibility of their livelihood kind of through this concept of a business that you're driving forward. Like there's so many people like myself that work a standard 9-to-5 job, don't have any understanding around, what actually that process looks like for people. So really, really keen just to understand what did that first year look like for you? Was it as crazy as a lot of founders sort of say it is?
Yeah, I think crazy can mean different things, right? For me, I think the first year we didn't have any sort of investment, so it was all bootstrapped based on the money that I had previously made, and that kind of led to really hiring like an initial team, which was really scary and daunting. How do you hire well? How do you know who to hire? How do you convince people to join something that has no branding awareness? You're still not really explaining it very well. There's all these sorts of problems. So for me, the first year was, it was really tough in the sense that it felt like it was really only you, because you didn't really have a solid team. You didn't really have like the backing or the clarity on where you were going. You just kind of had this sense of, this is the area that I want to be. These are the people that I want to help. I kind of know what I want to build and what problem I want to solve here, but really actioning that and putting that into an actual product, arranging that is very hard. So yeah, that first year was really about hiring my very first team, which I just did all on my own budget, using that to kind of build out a very early version of the product. And then at the end of that year, I actually went and raised some investor money, some VC money. And by that time, I'd had the time and also the mistakes to know what I needed to do next. So it was kind of like a, cool, we're going to start and like with a hiss and a roar, and then you realize that you're going to make a whole bunch of newbie mistakes, which you do in the first year. And then after that, you can kind of like, you've got a better idea of where this is going. Yeah.
And where does your like drive come from, Amber? Like, you strike me as just such a sort of motivated, driven person, and to even, in your final year of university, be thinking about like launching a startup to hopefully like retire young is like, I just don't think that's ingrained into many Kiwi students' psyche to begin with. So like, what pushes you to have this energy and sort of drive as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not too sure. I think that it can get quite deep quite quickly. So if we just go like really into the like, why are we here sort of question, which I think is where it comes from for me. It comes from like, what are you doing on this planet? Like, what is your purpose for being here? And I think I thought about that quite young. And what I realized was that for me, my reason for being here is to really find out all that I can do. And I may not be able to do it all at once, but I can do it all if I just focus on like one thing at a time and get my way through it. So I think that I always had this kind of sense of, I want to see where is my limit, where can I go, how fast can I push myself, or what is the most that I can achieve. And I think that that's what got me into, doing computer science when my brother was like, no, it's not for you. Like, why did I make that decision? I think because I just wanted to know that I could do it. I wanted to see and test myself, see if I could do it.
Yeah.
Same with going to Singapore. Like, I really wanted to push myself, not just to pass, but to see if I could be the best against some of the hardest competition that I'd found work-wise. Same with the thesis, submitting my own thesis. Like, I just wanted to really push and see what I could do. And I think that that's never really left. And then you combine that with a problem that you really care about, with people that that you can actually help, and it becomes a real force for change.
That's amazing. And do your parents share that same sort of drive as well? Like, do you reckon that was ingrained from maybe some lessons from your mum or dad, or your brothers?
I don't know. I think my brothers probably not. They're quite different to me.
Yeah.
And I think Yeah, I think what my mum and dad did really well was really like allow me to do anything that I wanted to do. So I was always signing up for everything that I possibly could. Like I had a real problem at school because I would just sign up for like as much as I can and then not be able to like commit to it all. But I really wanted to try that, and they never said like, oh, maybe it's too much, or maybe this isn't like, you know, maybe you should just focus on one thing. You know, they always really said just go for it and do it all. And I think that really like showed me, I felt like I'd found this like secret sauce, especially I played quite a lot of music when I was really young.
What instrument do you play?
I played piano and guitar.
Nice.
Yeah, piano first. My grandmom is like a piano teacher, so
it
was
good way to learn.
Yeah, it was kind of in the family. But I remember like I would go to school or I would like play piano and people would be like, wow, you're so talented. But they didn't see the hard work behind it. So I felt like I was able to trick myself into any scenario to be the best just by doing the work behind it, you know? And so I think that came in really young, where it was like, oh, okay, I can perform a magic trick here. People are going to think that I'm like very naturally talented at something when I have zero natural talent in it. And it's just because like I've put in the hours.
Yeah.
And I think that that was a very valuable lesson to learn.
Yeah. Talking about putting in the hours, like what does your like standard sort of week look like as a founder of a startup, you know, with some pretty ambitious growth plans? What does your sort of Monday to Friday or Monday to Sunday look like for you on average?
Yeah, so usually I'll get into the office like between 7:30 and 8 in the morning. I'll usually leave around like 8:30 at night. Usually like that's Monday to Friday most weeks. And then Saturday is like maybe a little bit of a later start. Like more of a 9 to 5 on the Saturday. And then Sunday is
doing podcasts.
Doing podcasts. Yeah, that's more for my family time. So yeah, that's a standard week.
Wow. So how long have you been working 6 days a week?
I think this is like probably the least amount that I've worked, because
really,
yeah, now that you have a team, like things are a bit more spread out.
True.
You can take a little bit more like time to focus on more of the higher level like sort of strategy piece. Whereas when it's just you, like you're doing everything. You're setting up the cameras, you know, you're the one doing the editing and the filming and everything that goes into whatever it is. Like you have to do it all.
Yeah.
But then as you grow a bit, you know, you don't have to put in as many hours.
Yeah.
It becomes more about what is the direction of the team. So for me, this feels like way nicer. I feel like the hardest year was definitely the first year.
Yeah. And what did that look like in terms of, I guess, your standard week through your first year? Is that 7 days a week for like 12 months, basically? Yeah,
basically. Because I was running all of my courses live. So I would be doing live calls. I would do them Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I would have back-to-back calls like that I was teaching in Monday and Friday. Sometimes I'd have 3 calls back-to-back. And they'd always after work hours, because you're teaching people who are working full-time jobs.
True.
So, you know, I would start teaching live from maybe like 5:30 and finish at 9:30 or something like that on a Friday. And then on Saturdays or Sundays, Saturdays, again, that's when my students are free. So sometimes we would do full-day study days, or we would do like catch-ups, or I would just be on hand for help. And then during the 9 to 5 normal days when my students are studying, like it's all outbound sales, acquisition, trying to find out like where are my next customers coming from, develop the course content, you know, respond to students' emails, mark their work. So that one was, I felt like even more work.
That is hectic. Like, you mean, what a workhorse you are. Do you ever experience like burnout? Because it sounds like you're almost burning the candle at both ends when you're explaining that.
Yeah, I think that the closest I had to burnout was definitely during the raise. Mostly because my daily habits went like straight out the window. So you just kind of get real dialed in on like, okay, I need to be exercising, like I need to be eating. I need to like have a routine here that works. And when that routine gets shaky, then that's when it can kind of all start to crumble. Yeah, I definitely don't work well past like 8 p.m. So I try and like really stop then and make sure that like I get to bed like fairly early so that I can wake up and like be fine. So I haven't really experienced burnout in that sense, but definitely the raise period was tough.
Yeah, let's definitely talk about the raise. $2.3 million. That's incredible. Congratulations. Can you speak us through, like, what does that process look like, getting sort of investment for your organization? Is it like a Dragon's Den sort of sales pitch? What sort of ducks do you need to line up in a row before, I guess, sort of pitching to these venture capitalists?
Yeah, the first duck that you need in the row is really like, is this something I want to personally commit to? Because when you take on venture capital, you are entering an entirely different race, an entirely different world. It is very different to a bootstrapped business, in the sense that a venture capital firm or an angel will invest in you with the expectation that you are going to return like a multiple of their initial investment within a 10-year period. So straight away, you have signed yourself up to be accountable and under the scrutiny and pressure of any investment that you take on. That is a completely different game to like a bootstrapped business, because now you have an entirely different set of stakeholders to worry about. And this is, where the misalignment comes. If you're just getting money from customers, then it's a very easy focus. Just build what the customers love.
Yeah.
When you've got investors, your money is coming from investors, but you're building for customers. So you have to be able to really have good communication skills and strong sense of mind to say, we're building for the customers, and we're going to be able to tell the investors why that's important. They may not always see it because they're not your customer. So you have to really understand personally, is this something I want to do? And I would not recommend it for everyone. I think that it's something that you really do have to have a very strong reason why you're taking on venture capital. Don't just take it on because it feels like
it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, or the sexy thing to do.
Yeah.
Just think it through properly.
Yeah.
Then once you've done that, then there's a whole bunch of work there on who you need to talk to, how much you need to raise, a bit of the Dragon's Den prep actually when it comes to pitching. But I think that the first one is the most important, and I think that's the easiest one to skip.
Yeah, I never really thought of that the way you've sort of articulated it there, because when you focus on the needs and desires from the customers, but now you've got these external perspectives and pressures and accountabilities, and they all probably could have misaligning views around how they could see your company wanting to scale and grow. And so sort of balancing that tightrope that you'll be walking would be really tough. So was that something that you were like chilling on a beach, vacationing somewhere, and you're like, man, okay, I really want to commit to NextWork and getting some VC funding? Or like, how did you personally reflect on that decision to go ahead with VC?
Yeah, it was not on a beach.
You're probably in the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Go crazy.
The business that I was doing, which was very services based, doing those manual calls every night, and that was going really well. I think I was up to making around 600, 700K a year, and it was kind of coming to this crossroads where I realized like, oh, I can continue building this business. I could probably make it up to 1 to 2 mil a year and be really financially sorted for myself. But I'm also starting to learn really about what is a good online learning experience. And I can see this convergence of the technology that's changing, the expectations and like pressure in a consumer point of view, what they want. And then me being here and being able to like put all these pieces together. I can see these all coming together. So I felt like I can continue down the current road, or I can like take a chance and solve this bigger problem. How do you make that call and make that decision? For me, I just listed out everything that I wanted to do in my life. Really, it was just a big list, a huge list. I think there were like hundreds of items on this list. And I just realized that there was more that I wanted to do down this product side than I actually had years left to live on this planet. And I was like, okay, cool. That makes my choice very clear. I'm going to go down this road. Do I want to bootstrap it? I can just keep working and make the money and then do it that way.
Yeah.
Or do I want to take VC investment? If I bootstrap it, that's probably going to take me around 2 years. Okay, 2 years. Shit, I'm going to have to cross these two things off my list. Like, do I really want to do that? And that was when I started to really understand that taking on VC capital is actually you're buying time. That is really like the only reason to do it. Because I think that if you've got a good business sense and like a good ability to build a company, a services company, then you can bootstrap anything. But the trade-off is that it's going to take you longer. It's going to take you time. So that's really like a founder decision do you want to take that time, or do you want to, take on
Mm,
all of the admin that comes around VCs,
mm,
but have 2 years back in your pocket to do what you want to do?
yeah, buying time. Wow, it's the most valuable resource. That's interesting how you put that there. And what do you see, Emma, as like the vision or the strategic sort of direction for NextWork? Like, where do you see the sort of market cap for the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think that it's really big because ultimately we're solving a very fundamental problem about how to make online learning really great, really fantastic. And I think that this is much bigger than just AWS or cloud computing, which we're learning now, and which we're teaching. It's really about how can you teach any skill that humanity needs in order to solve some of our biggest problems. So when you think, okay, well, what are the biggest problems that are coming up? Well, one big problem is the number of doctors that we have, like, in the world. Why is it that, uh, you know, India has, 1 to I don't know how many thousand citizens for a doctor, and
Mm,
Switzerland has the highest ratio of doctors in the world? What if we could actually improve that? What if there was a better way to actually meet the skill demand for this problem? And so I think that where I personally want to see NextWork get to is a situation where you could learn any vocational skill at any point in time from anywhere in the world. And this includes technology, obviously, but also things like law, architecture,
mm,
healthcare. All the way up to thinking, hey, what if nuclear fusion gets solved? Like, what kind of skill sets are we going to need to provide the world in order to move forwards in that area?
mm,
And how can we get those skill sets out faster? So, we're starting with a very small niche, but really we're trying to build this underlying platform that makes online learning a really, truly personalized experience
mm.
so that we can increase the rate at which humans learn new skills.
And they're actually recognized by industry as well. Like that's the whole mindset shift, to try and unlock. And has it been? I'm real interested as well. I think when I had Mahesh on the podcast, and if you haven't watched that, make sure you go check it out. Really fascinating guy, who's done a lot of work around sort of venture capital and building businesses in New Zealand to go global. He was really sort of driving home, I guess, like the key message of encouraging more Kiwi companies to have like a global mindset rather than just thinking in the sort of box of New Zealand and the New Zealand ecosystem. Has that been like a particular focus for you around being actually like a global product enterprise rather than just focusing on the little small niche market of New Zealand at the bottom of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would totally agree with that. Like, being able to serve, a group of people that is all over the world, I think is really, what a joy. What fun. It really does make it really fun.
Mm,
So, and there's no reason not to do that anymore. In fact, for us, it was harder to keep things niched into New Zealand because you were relying very much on like local sources of word of mouth and
mm,
sharing of like what is good. Whereas as soon as you start posting stuff on like social media, anyone can see it, anyone can find it. So you're really just opening yourself up to anyone in the world.
mm,
And I think that is part of what makes building a business so much fun, is that, what we're talking about here, like anyone in the world could listen to this.
mm.
And what we're building at NextWork, like that can help anyone in the world
Yeah.
who has the means to be able to reach it. So, yeah, I think why not?
Yeah, why not? And for most of your like customers, are they Kiwi based or based all around the world?
No, all around the world now. So I think, we've got over 100 different countries of people who are using NextWork now. I think our top 5 is at the US, Canada, the UK, India, and I want to say Ghana, or a
Wow, cool.
combination of like African countries, which,
That's cool.
yeah, really exploding market. They're
Mm.
very like eager people to learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Far out. Yeah, it's just super. It's amazing how like technology can just make so many of these like conversations and products just global and so much more accessible. Is there anything which you would uh like you think more Kiwi founders or entrepreneurs could learn from the sort of mindset around entrepreneurship, particularly in the States, from your experience doing some work over there?
It's a really good question. I think in the States, the biggest thing I noticed was that they had a real strong culture around second and third time founders. So these are people who, this is their second business they founded, third business, fourth, fifth,
Hmm.
sixth. They just don't stop. They just keep on founding new things. even when the first, 3 or 4 are complete flops. In fact, we've talked to VC firms who say, hey, we only exclusively invest in second-time founders.
Oh, right.
And I think in New Zealand, we still have this kind of perception of a founder as someone who's like very young, a little naive, like is in this time of their life where they can just like go out and take all the risks and do it all. But actually in the US, like founders are of all ages, of all experiences. And just because you've failed, in a few businesses before, that doesn't mean that you have less of an edge. In fact, in a lot of places, it's more advantageous if you have had several failures under your belt. In New Zealand, I meet very, very few founders who are second-time or third-time founders. Most of them will just be a first-time founder. Great, worked, cash out, off we go. Whereas, and if it doesn't work in New Zealand, then it's almost like, well, that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, they don't have that same mentality. They actually really value that failure a lot more. And I think that's an incredible advantage in the US.
Is that because like they're more resilient than us, or what do you think?
No, I think that like people are resilient wherever you are. I think that New Zealanders are very resilient. I think we haven't seen it as much. There hasn't been as many examples. It's not as talked about as much.
Yeah.
And I think it really could be. But yeah, no, I think New Zealanders are 100% capable of doing everything that, is being talked about and done in America as well.
As you're saying that, I was thinking about the Fire Festival, and that massive pretend festival that actually didn't happen. It was a massive scam. And I think the founder of that initiative ended up spending time in prison because he owed so many people just millions of dollars of money. And I think he's actually coming back to like launch the Fire Festival again. So, I mean, like it's exactly what you're saying, right? Yeah. It's just this like relentless pursuit of, testing the waters, scaling a business, giving it a crack, and showing up.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's so cool. I mean, and you learn so much, by the time you've done that first business, going on to do a second business, I can absolutely see why you would have more of an advantage then. So I think, thinking about, failure in a slightly different mindset is very useful, but also understanding that starting a business and being founder can happen at any stage of life as well, I think is also like really powerful.
Yeah.
And, even like how we operate here right now at NextWork doesn't always have to be the right fit for everyone. You don't have to do exactly what we're doing or work the crazy hours to found your own company or do your own thing. Like there's many different ways to do this.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is that it just gets done.
Yeah, totally. And I was keen to also ask you, Amber, like you have a good finger on the pulse around sort of like AI and tech, like particularly in relation to the potential of maybe people losing out in the job market in particular industries with the rise of artificial intelligence. Do you have any sort of inkling to what that might look like in a New Zealand context? Are we already sort of experiencing people losing their jobs, or is like ChatGPT and all of these new tech platforms kind of like this new emerging technology that we're all sort of like twiddling our fingers in? We won't see the full effects in the next sort of 10 years or so.
Yeah, no, I think we're already definitely seeing the effects of like AI taking jobs for sure. But this has been going on for a long time. I mean, you can look at cashiers in a supermarket.
100%, yeah.
You can look at, I think that, drivers are very soon going to become pretty obsolete. In San Francisco, there's a lot of self-driving.
I've seen that.
Like Waymo sort of cars.
That's wild, eh?
It is wild, but it really does get you thinking, like, okay, cool, this might not be like a tomorrow thing, but this is definitely coming. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely a change on the way. And I think that what that's going to mean is that people are really going to have to upskill. They're really going to have to like be able to learn new skills very, very quickly, which is obviously like NextWork's whole thing. But I think the interesting thing as well is to think of who actually needs to upskill. Often you think it's going to be, the very manual labor type work that is going to be automated first. But actually, if you look at where the investment is going from a VC lens, what AI companies are people investing in? A lot of them are AI companies that automate very high paid worker jobs, like top software engineers,
Mm.
for example. There's a lot of AI companies that are designed to help or automate parts of a engineer's job.
Mm.
This is a career that everyone thought was going to be super steady,
Yep.
the path of the future to be a software engineer.
Yep.
But actually most of the AI technology being developed, or a lot of it, is actually on how can we automate this. And the reason for that is because the cost of a software engineer is so expensive for a business that if they can automate that, it's much more valuable to them than automating your minimum wage worker who's doing manual work.
Yeah, right.
Which AI solution would you pay for more?
Yeah, true. Like the return on investment.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So I don't think this is just something that affects people who aren't in tech or who, are working like more minimum wage style. In fact, this might be something that's a real problem for those
skilled
who
workers
are already really skilled.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. I mean, thinking from like even from lawyers, I think even as like from a legal perspective, how far away is society until an AI can like produce a provision of services template, which is totally robust and sound tight as if you engage like Russell McVeigh or something.
Yeah, massively.
We can't be too far away from that for sure. Are you optimistic about like where the future is heading in regards to AI? Because it seems like everything's happening so fast. Like if you were to say 10 years ago, there would be ChatGPT can speak to you basically like it's a person on the other end and it's super smart. I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like there's no way that's even possible. So things are just moving at like an insane pace. Like, are you optimistic at like the direction of where society is heading around technology?
Yeah, I think you have to be. I think if you're in the business of building using AI in your products, you have to be optimistic about where this is going. So yeah, I am very excited for it. I think that it's going to make a lot of things a lot easier. I think that like any change, it's scary. But when I think about the future that I want to live in, like a lot of it involves things that AI does. And yeah, I'm very excited for it. I say like bring it on. Let's do it.
Let's go. Give me a Tesla robot around the house and I'll be happy.
Yeah, did you see the Wii robot launch?
Insane.
Yeah.
Like I could hear it was like talking as well.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain there was like someone with like a microphone listening. Like, is it actually?
Yeah, is it actually AI? I don't know. This is kind of like the big question.
Insane.
But I think the prototype itself is enough to be like, wow, okay. Like, it may not be ready now, but it will be at some point. Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
100%. Yeah, it's pretty insane. And when it comes to like, what has been some of the biggest pieces of advice that you've had as a young entrepreneur? Is there anything that sort of stands out to you in particular that has been really helpful in guiding your decisions?
It's funny what you remember, because I don't remember so much the good pieces of advice as the bad pieces of advice.
Okay. Let's go into them. What were some of the...
I think that some of the advice that I got when I was pitching in particular was, don't think so big, no one's going to believe it. Why do you need to raise so much? It means that you're going to have to succeed at a much higher rate in order to prove next time that investment was worth it. Better to raise a smaller amount and then you don't have to live up to so much. These sorts of things I think are bad pieces of advice. Or like, why don't you change your standards so that they're not so high and then you can meet them every time? This kind of advice I think is not good advice. I think that you should almost do the opposite of all those things. So what I like to do with bad pieces of advice, or advice that I'm like, wow, that seemed kind of crazy, I always write it down in a little notebook, and then if someone's given me the opposite advice, I just cross out both and I just say, okay, I'm just gonna delete them both from my memory and just do what I think is best. But yeah, I think that those have been as much of a guiding factor as good pieces of advice. Yeah,
well, not shout out to those people that have been saying that sort of stuff. I guess that sort of is on the note of sort of tall poppy syndrome in New Zealand as well, and maybe like imposter syndrome. Have you had any experience, I guess, with any of those two sort of topics? Maybe people wanting to lower the expectations of in your ambitions?
Yeah, I think you don't really feel it so much until you've got something to compare it against. So, I think before I'd been to the States, for example, I would have said no, like it was totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't felt anything sort of like unusual in that regard. But then when you're in the States and you pitch exactly the same pitch, and the response over there is like, okay, cool, but then what? Like, what's your plan after that?
Right.
How big is this going to get? Whereas the response for exactly the same pitch in New Zealand can sometimes be like, that's way too big, no one's going to believe it, you should remove that entirely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there is a bit of a problem there, but you really do just have to craft that culture yourself. And there are people out there who are very like attracted to wanting to work on something that's big and audacious and like really a challenge that's going to push them in their work to do something great. And I think those people are certainly around in New Zealand. They're perhaps just not as vocal about it as in other countries, but if you really like seek them out, then you can find them, and you can create an incredible team of very high performers. And I think that's the best way to really like combat against that, is to build this little like bubble of the way that you want to believe and operate in your standards.
That mindset's so important. And it's always, I've said this on the podcast a few times, but very interesting, like growing up in New Zealand. And I feel like a really common insult back in the day, if you were good at something, it's particularly in primary school, people call you a try hard.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're too smart, you're a try hard. Or, oh, you're too good at sport, you're a try hard.
Yeah.
And it's I feel like that sort of thinking is somehow like people don't like to stick out.
Yeah.
And they'll just love to see a society of just people who are kind of doing the same thing. Like the law of sort of averages. So yeah, I just love having this sort of platform with Beyond the Service to get people on like you, who's a young entrepreneur going global, absolutely smashing it, living in Porirua as well. I didn't even realize.
Shout out Porirua.
Shout out Porirua. And it's just amazing. Yeah. So hopefully these sort of conversations can inspire other people to think like, hey, actually, I want to go chase that dream that someone said years ago was a shit idea to begin with. So I love you, Mahi.
Awesome. Thank you. No, absolutely.
Cool. We'll wrap up with some sort of quick fire questions, and then we'll finish up on a quote. But before we do so, where can people keep up with you and your Mahi, Amber?
Probably the best place is our social media. So it's NextWork is our Instagram page, TikTok, LinkedIn.
TikTok.
Yeah.
Nice.
Man, TikTok was great for us. Yeah. YouTube. I'd say LinkedIn. Just connect there if you're interested, and let's do it.
Awesome. Cool. I'll put some links in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this episode. Cool. Amber, what brings you true happiness?
Like a lemon cheesecake.
Nice.
No, I think working on NextWork for sure.
Cool. I like that. It's like a little personal question, and then but straight back to NextWork. What is the meaning of life?
The meaning of life for me is to really find out all that I can do, and to live a life that I'm happy with and that helps to make other people happy.
Advice you wish you knew about when you were younger?
Ooh, advice I wish I knew about. I think finding like a regular routine for exercises is really, really important. Yeah.
Nice. Completely agree. What does legacy mean to you?
Legacy means that the world has benefited from you being here.
If you could change one thing in New Zealand, what would this be?
I think the attitude around second and third time founders. I would love it if someone came up to me and said, hey, I'm a third time founder and my first 2 businesses were like complete flops, but here's what I've learned.
Cool. And what do you believe is the main thing that is holding back young people in New Zealand?
I think probably a fear of failure combined with how do I start? And I think that both of those things are very hard to jump into, but if there's anyone who is wondering about both of those, then come and chat. And I'd be happy to talk about it. It's worth doing. Whatever it is, like it's worth starting.
Awesome. You heard it there, team. Well, thanks so much, Amber. Really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story and all of the awesome work that you're up to. We'll finish with a quote. And I actually found this, I think it might be one of your favorite quotes, by Jim Rohn.
Yeah.
And it goes, "You may not be able to do all you find, but you must find out all you can do." Cheers, Amber.
Thank you so much.